Ethan Walker didn't think of himself as unhappy. That word felt too dramatic, too loud for a life that had gone quiet years ago. He was 36, a single father, and tired in a way sleep never fixed. Every morning followed the same exhausted rhythm. He woke up before dawn in his small rented apartment on the edge of town, brewed cheap coffee, and packed a lunch he barely touched. He moved carefully so he wouldn't wake Lily too early. She was 8, bright-eyed, gentle, and far too understanding for a child her age. After his wife, Megan, died suddenly from a brain aneurysm 3 years ago, Ethan learned how to function on autopilot. Grief didn't come in loud sobs anymore. It lived quietly in his chest, heavy and persistent, like something pressing down but never quite crushing him. He worked long hours at a mid-sized marketing firm downtown. Nothing glamorous, nothing stable enough to feel safe. He showed up early, stayed late, and kept his head down. He didn't complain. He didn't ask for raises. He didn't expect recognition. Invisible was safer. Bills piled up anyway. Rent, groceries, school supplies, shoes. Lily outgrew faster than he could replace them. Some months, Ethan skipped meals without realizing it. Other months, he pretended the credit card balance wasn't real. At night, after Lily fell asleep clutching her stuffed dolphin, Ethan sat alone on the couch, scrolling through emails he didn't care about or staring at the muted television. He rarely cried. Crying required energy. He simply felt hollow. His sister liked to say he was strong. Ethan knew better. He wasn't strong. He was resilient, worn down, emotionally guarded, and running on obligation. He loved his daughter fiercely, protectively, but he no longer recognized the man he was outside of being her father. Sometimes Lily would look up at him with those serious eyes and ask, "Daddy, are you okay?" He always smiled and said yes, because that's what good fathers did. But the truth was simpler and sadder. Ethan wasn't living anymore. He was surviving, getting through days, counting hours, waiting for nothing in particular. He told himself that was enough, until one evening when his sister called and said, "You can't keep disappearing inside your life." And for the first time in years, Ethan wondered, quietly, fearfully, what it might feel like to stay. Ethan almost canceled. He stood in his bedroom, tie hanging loose around his neck, staring at his reflection like it belonged to someone else. The man in the mirror looked fatigued, hesitant, emotionally guarded, not exactly someone ready for a date. "This is stupid," he muttered. His sister's voice echoed in his head anyway. "Just go. You don't have to fall in love, you just have to show up." So he did. The restaurant was one of those mid-range places downtown, soft lighting, exposed brick, the kind of spot people chose when they wanted to feel grown up without trying too hard. Ethan arrived early, sat at the table, and checked his phone out of habit. No messages. No reason to be there except that he'd said yes. When his date finally walked in, he didn't notice her face at first. What he noticed was her body language. She stood near the host stand, shoulders slumped, hands trembling, clearly fighting tears. Then she reached the table. And she broke. She sat down and covered her face, her entire body shaking with quiet, uncontrollable sobs. Ethan froze. This wasn't awkward. This was raw, uncomfortable, painfully human. Every instinct told him to leave. He hadn't come prepared to deal with someone else's pain. He barely managed his own. He stood halfway out of his chair, then stopped. Something held him there, not curiosity, not obligation, recognition. Carefully, gently, he cleared his throat. "Hey, are you okay?" The woman's hands stilled. Slowly she looked up, eyes red, mascara streaked down her cheeks. Embarrassed. Exposed. "I'm sorry," she said, voice shaking. "This is so embarrassing." Ethan sat back down. In that moment, he wasn't a man on a date. He wasn't a grieving widower or a tired father. He was just a human being choosing to stay. And neither of them knew it yet, but that small decision, to not walk away, was about to change everything. They sat there in silence for a few seconds too long. The woman wiped her face with a napkin, took a shaky breath, and finally looked at Ethan. Really looked at him. Her brow furrowed, confusion flashing across her expression. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "Do I know you?" Ethan's stomach dropped. Up close there was no denying it. The sharp cheekbones, the calm authority beneath the vulnerability. The face he'd seen on company-wide emails, quarterly meetings streamed on a screen he usually half-watched from the back of the room. His chest tightened. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I think you do." Her eyes narrowed slightly, searching his face. And then recognition hit her like a wave. "Oh my God!" She straightened instantly, embarrassment giving way to shock. "You work at Reynolds & Co." Ethan nodded once. "Marketing, Ethan Walker." The color drained from her face. This can't be right," she whispered. My assistant set this up. She just said your name was Ethan. She didn't... She stopped, pressing a hand to her forehead. I had no idea. Neither did I, Ethan thought. Claire Reynolds, his CEO. The woman whose signature decided promotions, layoffs, livelihoods. The woman who had never once noticed him in 4 years. The air between them felt tight, fragile, dangerously unbalanced. I can leave, Ethan said automatically. It was the safest option. The familiar one. No, she said too quickly. Please don't. She hesitated, then sighed, shoulders slumping again. I don't want to be Claire Reynolds tonight. I just wanted to be a person. Ethan studied her, really studied her, and saw past the tailored confidence he'd always associated with her. What he saw now was overwhelmed, guarded, quietly unraveling. Something shifted. This wasn't a power imbalance anymore. It was two people sitting at the same table, both exposed in ways neither had planned. And for the first time since his wife died, Ethan felt something unexpected stir in his chest. Not hope, not fear, just the unsettling realization that this night wasn't going to be simple, and walking away might be the biggest mistake of all. Claire stared down at the table, fingers wrapped tightly around her glass like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. This is a mess, she said quietly. Not angry, not dramatic, just tired. Ethan waited. He didn't rush to fill the silence. He'd learned that some moments needed space to breathe. I spend my entire life being watched, Claire continued, her voice low and unsteady. Every word analyzed, every decision questioned. Everyone sees the title before they see me. She let out a soft, humorless laugh. Or they don't see me at all. Ethan felt a strange pull in his chest. This wasn't the confident executive from board meetings. This was a woman who sounded emotionally isolated, chronically guarded, deeply exhausted. I came here tonight thinking maybe, just maybe, I could be anonymous for once, Claire said. Just Claire, no expectations, no power, no agenda. She finally looked up at him, eyes glossy but steady. Then I realized how stupid that was. It's not stupid, Ethan said gently. She blinked, surprised. It's human, he added. The words seemed to land somewhere deep. Claire swallowed hard. I'm 32, she said. Successful by every measurable standard. And I've never felt more alone in my life. Ethan shifted in his chair, the weight of her confession settling between them. He recognized that loneliness, the kind that didn't come from being alone, but from being unseen. People don't want me, she went on. They want access, security, status. I don't know how to tell the difference anymore. Her voice cracked just slightly. Ethan didn't try to fix it. He didn't offer advice or reassurance. He just stayed. And in that quiet, vulnerable space, something subtle but powerful happened. The balance between them shifted again, not because of titles or circumstances, but because two guarded people were finally telling the truth. For the first time that night, Claire wasn't a CEO. She was just a woman asking herself the same question Ethan had been avoiding for years. Is this really all there is? They sat there for a long moment, the low hum of the restaurant filling the silence between them. Plates clinked somewhere behind Ethan. Laughter drifted from another table. Life going on, untouched. Claire broke the quiet first. You don't talk much about yourself, she said softly. Not in the way that people usually do. Ethan let out a slow breath. He hadn't planned on saying anything. He'd already shared more than he normally allowed. But something about the way she looked at him, open, attentive, unguarded, made it harder to keep the walls up. My wife died 3 years ago, he said. The words landed heavier than he expected. Claire's face changed instantly. Not shock, not pity, just a quiet, genuine sadness. I'm so sorry, she said. Brain aneurysm, Ethan continued, his voice steady even as his chest tightened. 1 minute she was fine. The next, she was gone. No warning, no goodbye. He stared at his hands. Her name was Megan. She was 32, the same age as Claire. She left me with our daughter, he went on. Lily. She was 5 when it happened. I've been trying to hold everything together ever since. Claire didn't interrupt. She didn't rush him. People say I'm strong, Ethan said with a faint, bitter smile. But most days, I'm just tired. I work too much because if I stop, I feel everything. And that scares me more than being exhausted. Claire's eyes filled, but she didn't look away. You had real love, she said quietly. That matters. Ethan nodded. It does, but losing it nearly destroyed me. The truth sat between them. Raw, exposed, painfully honest. Two people who hadn't come looking for connection, 2 lives shaped by the loss in different ways. And in that moment, neither of them felt quite so alone anymore. Not because the pain was gone, but because someone else finally understood it. Claire reached for her phone almost absent-mindedly, as if trying to steady herself after everything Ethan had shared. "I hope this isn't strange," she said, hesitating. "But what do you actually do at the company?" Ethan blinked. "Marketing strategy, mostly back-end work. Proposals, research, long-term planning." Claire frowned slightly. "Have you ever submitted anything directly to leadership?" He gave a small, knowing smile. "Once. A few times, actually." She noticed that tone, the resigned, quietly defeated one. "Do you remember what it was about?" she asked. "Client retention," Ethan said. "A restructuring idea. It took me about 2 months to put together." Claire's fingers paused mid-scroll. Her expression shifted, curious, then intent. "Wait," she murmured. She typed quickly, eyes scanning her screen. The longer she read, the more her jaw tightened. "This proposal," she said slowly. "It was flagged as a low priority by your department head. It never reached my team." Ethan's chest sank. "That doesn't surprise me." Claire looked up sharply. "It should." She turned the phone toward him. "This is solid. Not just solid, smart. Clear, data-driven, realistic. This could have increased client retention by at least 15%. Ethan stared at the screen, a mix of pride and frustration twisting in his chest. "I figured no one would care." Claire leaned back, anger flashing beneath her composed exterior. "Who's your manager?" "Mark Ellison," Ethan answered quietly. She nodded once. "Decisive, controlled, dangerous." "I built this company to reward good work," Claire said. "Not to bury it. And I can't fix what I don't see." She met Ethan's eyes, her voice firm but sincere. "I won't promise miracles, but I will promise this. You won't be invisible anymore." Something cracked open inside Ethan, not hope, not relief. Recognition. For the first time in years, someone had actually seen him. Not just his pain, but his value. And neither of them fully realized it yet. But that moment marked the beginning of a change far bigger than either of them expected. Ethan didn't sleep much that night. He lay awake in the dark, listening to the Lily's soft breathing through the thin apartment walls, replaying every word Claire had said. "You won't be invisible anymore." The sentence echoed in his head like something dangerous, something he didn't know how to trust. By morning, reality crept back in. Claire was his CEO. The dinner had been a mistake, an emotional collision that would quietly fade once daylight returned. At least that's what Ethan told himself. At 9:17 a.m., his phone buzzed. From Human Resources, "Ethan Walker, please report to Conference Room B on the executive floor at 10:00 a.m. His hands went cold. This was it. The regret. The cleanup. The professional distance snapping back into place. The executive floor felt foreign, polished, quiet, intimidating. When Ethan stepped into the conference room, Claire was already there, composed and unmistakably in control. Black blazer, hair pulled back, CEO again. But when she saw him, something softened. "Sit down," she said. "I wanted to speak to you before this became official." His chest tightened. "Official?" "I terminated Mark Ellison this morning," Claire said calmly. Ethan froze. "You what?" "I reviewed his files," she continued. "Your proposal wasn't the only one he buried. He's been protecting his position for years. I won't tolerate that." The words felt unreal. "I'm restructuring the department," Claire said, sliding a folder across the table, "and I want you leading strategy." Ethan stared at it, heart pounding. "Claire, I'm not—" "You are," she interrupted. "You've been doing the work already. You just haven't been given the authority." He opened the folder. The numbers blurred. Tripled salary, flexible hours, direct access to leadership. "This changes everything," he whispered. "Yes," Claire said quietly. "It should." Ethan looked up, torn between disbelief and fear. "Why are you doing this?" She held his gaze. "Because last night reminded me why I started this company. To see people, and I failed you." Silence settled. Finally, Ethan nodded. "Okay," he said. "I'll try." Claire smiled, small, real, relieved. And just like that, Ethan's life took a turn he never saw coming. The first few weeks passed in a blur. Ethan threw himself into the new role with a mix of cautious determination and quiet disbelief. Meetings he once sat through in silence now required his voice. Ideas he used to keep to himself were suddenly being implemented. For the first time in years, he felt useful, needed. But the biggest change wasn't the title or the paycheck. It was the time. Claire insisted on flexibility. "Go to your daughter's school events," she told him. "The work will wait." The first time Ethan left early without guilt, he sat in his car afterward, hands on the steering wheel, stunned by how emotional it felt. Claire kept her distance at the office, professional, composed, respectful. No special treatment, no crossed lines, and yet something unspoken lingered between them, delicate and unresolved. They ran into each other one evening outside the building. The city was cooling down, the sidewalks glowing under streetlights. "Long day?" Claire asked. Ethan nodded. "Good day." They stood there awkwardly for a second, like two people unsure of what came next. "Would you want to grab coffee?" she asked carefully. "Not about work, just coffee." Ethan hesitated. His first instinct was to protect Lily, to protect himself. But this didn't feel reckless, it felt honest. "Okay," he said. They talked for hours. About childhood, regrets, music, the strange weight of responsibility. Claire laughed more than he'd ever seen her laugh. Ethan found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't since Megan died. Still, fear sat beneath it all. "I don't want to confuse things," Ethan admitted. "Neither do I," Claire said. "We don't have to define anything." They sat in that shared uncertainty, hopeful but guarded, aware that whatever this was, it mattered. And for the first time, Ethan didn't feel like he was betraying the past by enjoying the present. Ethan hadn't been this nervous in years. The park was quiet that Saturday afternoon, late summer sunlight filtering through tall trees, children's laughter echoing somewhere near the playground. Lily ran ahead of him, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders, already scanning the area with curious excitement. "Is she nice?" Lily asked for the third time. "Yes," Ethan said, then corrected himself. "She's kind." That seemed to satisfy her. Claire was sitting on a bench near the pond when they arrived. Jeans, a soft sweater, hair loose. She looked younger somehow, less guarded, more human. When she saw them, she stood quickly, nerves flashing across her face. "Hi," she said. "Hi," Ethan replied. "This is Lily." Lily studied Claire with the unfiltered honesty only children possessed. "Are you my dad's boss?" Claire blinked, then laughed lightly. "I am. But today I'm just Claire." Lily considered that. "Okay." They walked together, slow and awkward at first. Claire asked Lily about school, about her favorite books, about why dolphins were clearly superior to every other animal. She listened, really listened, as if Lily's thoughts mattered. Ethan watched closely, his heart tight. This wasn't a casual moment. This was trust. At one point, Lily ran ahead to feed ducks by the pond. Claire leaned closer to Ethan. "She's amazing," she said softly. "She's my whole world," Ethan replied. Claire nodded. "I won't take that lightly." That promise mattered more than anything. Later, as they sat on the grass sharing snacks, Lily looked up at Claire and said matter-of-factly, "I like you." Claire's eyes filled instantly. "I'm glad," she whispered. Ethan felt something shift deep inside him, not fear, not resistance, relief. Because for the first time, the idea of a future that included someone else didn't feel dangerous. It felt possible. It didn't happen all at once. There was no dramatic moments where Ethan suddenly realized they were becoming a family. It happened quietly, in pieces. Claire started showing up, not with grand gestures or expensive plans, but with presence. She came over on weeknights with takeout and helped Lily with homework. She sat on the floor during movie nights, laughing at jokes meant for kids. She learned Lily's routines, her moods, the way she liked her grilled cheese cut diagonally, not straight. Ethan noticed everything. Claire never tried to replace anyone. She didn't push. She didn't overstep. She simply stayed. Consistent, patient, emotionally available. One evening after Lily fell asleep, Ethan and Claire sat on the couch, the apartment quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. "I don't want to rush anything," Ethan said, voice low. "I know," Claire replied. "I don't want to rush either." They shared a look filled with mutual understanding and careful hope. At work, boundaries remained firm. Claire treated Ethan like any other department head, demanding, fair, respectful. If anything, she expected more from him. He rose to it. For the first time, Ethan felt proud of both the man he was at home and the professional he was becoming. One Saturday morning, Lily tugged on Ethan's sleeve as he made pancakes. "Is Claire coming today?" she asked casually. Ethan paused. "Do you want her to?" Lily nodded. "She makes Saturdays better." The simplicity of that statement hit him hard. Later that day, watching Claire braid Lily's hair with clumsy focus, Ethan felt something unfamiliar settle into his chest. Peace. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of safety. He realized then that love didn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it grew slowly through trust, routine, and the quiet decision to keep showing up. And without anyone announcing it, without any promises made out loud, They were already becoming something more. It happened on a quiet night. Lily was asleep, the apartment dim and still, rain tapping softly against the windows. Ethan and Claire sat on the small balcony, sharing a bottle of wine, city lights flickering below like distant stars. Claire was unusually quiet. "I need to tell you something," she said finally. Ethan's chest tightened. "Okay." She took a breath, steady but fragile. "I'm falling in love with you. With both of you." She let out a nervous laugh. "And it terrifies me." Ethan turned toward her. "Why?" "Because I've never had this," Claire said. "Not like this. I don't know how to do it without messing it up." Ethan understood that fear too well. Loving meant risking everything. Before he could answer, Claire added softly, "Lily told me something yesterday." His heart skipped. "What?" "She said she wished I could be her mom someday." Claire's voice broke. Ethan felt the weight of that confession pressed down on him. Tender, overwhelming, frightening. He thought of Megan, of the promises he'd made to protect Lily, of how careful he'd been not to let anyone get close. "Claire," he said slowly, "I'm scared too." She looked up, eyes glistening. "I'm scared of loving you and losing you," he continued. "I'm scared of letting Lily hope for something that could disappear." Silence stretched between them. Then Claire reached for his hand. "I can't promise I won't make mistakes," she said, "but I can promise I won't disappear." That mattered. Ethan exhaled, something heavy loosening in his chest. "That's all I need." She leaned in, hesitant, giving him time to pull away. He didn't. Their kiss was gentle, unhurried, built from trust rather than urgency. When they pulled back, Claire whispered, "I love you." Ethan closed his eyes, then opened them, certain. "I love you too." And in that moment, they both knew. There was no turning back now. 3 months later, Ethan brought Claire back to the same restaurant where everything had begun. Same warm lighting, same corner table, different people. Claire smiled as she sat down, her eyes brighter now, lighter, more grounded, quietly joyful. She had learned how to laugh without holding back, how to belong without apologizing. "Why here?" she asked, amused. "Because this is where I almost walked away," Ethan said, and didn't. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small box. Claire froze. Ethan's hands trembled, but his voice didn't. "I know this hasn't been long. I know life doesn't come with guarantees. But I also know this. When you find someone who sees you when you're at your weakest, you don't wait." He looked at her, really looked at her. "Claire Reynolds, will you marry me?" Tears spilled freely down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, of course, yes." The wedding was small. No press, no spectacle, just people who mattered. Lily walked down the aisle first, carefully scattering flower petals, her face serious with importance. When she reached Ethan, she beamed. Claire followed, radiant in a simple white dress, eyes locked on Ethan like he was the only person in the world. Later, after the vows, Lily tugged on Claire's hand. "Does this mean you're my mom now?" she asked. Claire knelt down, tears in her eyes. "Only if that's okay with you." Lily nodded immediately. "I've been waiting." Claire pulled her into a hug, and Ethan wrapped his arms around both of them, his family. Months later, they walked through the same park where Claire had first met Lily. Autumn leaves painted the ground gold and red. Lily ran ahead, laughing, asking for ice cream. Ethan watched them, heart full in a way he once thought impossible. "I never thought I'd feel this happy again," he admitted. Claire squeezed his hand. "Neither did I." As Lily ran back and grabbed both their hands, Ethan realized something simple and powerful. Love didn't save them because it was perfect. It saved them because they stayed. Stayed through fear. Stayed through uncertainty. Stayed when walking away would have been easier. Sometimes all it takes to change a life is one person asking, "Are you okay?" And another person brave enough to answer honestly. So let me ask you, what part of the story touched you the most? Have you ever almost walked away from something that could have changed everything? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you of what truly matters, family, healing, and the courage to stay, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories that feel real, human, and close to the heart. Thank you for staying with us until the end.